Hey guys, welcome to Mission San Jose ACM Computer Science 1. This is going to be the first lecture of this series. If you guys are tuning in from home, or if you guys just want to review on some concepts that that you didn't get in class, this is the place for you. So let's go ahead and start up Eclipse right now and dive right into the action. So for those of you who don't know, the AP Computer Science test is going to be in Java. So that's the language that we're going to use. Just ignore that pop-up box. So let's go ahead and create a new project now. So you right-click, go to New Java Project. And for this purpose, let's just name our project Lesson 1. Lecture 1. Alright, so next we right-click over Lecture 1, the project that we just created. So right-click. And go to New Java Class. And let's just name it Hello World for this case. Alright, so now we're done. So this is where we're going to be writing the majority of our Java code. So every Java code or Java application starts with something called a main function. So a main function is just where the program knows to start executing. So everything that you have in your main function is what's going to run when you run your program. So there's lots of modifiers to the main function. Modifier meaning there's just lots of fancy terminology that's used when you write it in your program. You guys honestly don't have to worry about that right now. We'll probably go into that later on in the course, but for now we don't need to. So let's public static void main, and in parentheses string bracket args curly brace, and then enter. So now you guys are inside of your main function. As I said earlier, this is where the program knows to start running. So everything inside the main function will be run when you run your program. So let's start with the most basic application. Let's try to make the program print out hello world on the screen. So let's start by writing system.out.println and in parentheses hello world. And don't forget the quotation marks. So what we're doing is we're actually creating a string called hello world. So remember to put semicolons at the end of every statement. As you can see here, I have an error because I didn't have a semicolon, but after I added the semicolon, it was gone. Java doesn't know when to end each statement, so semicolons are necessary if you want to make your program run properly. On the Java test or on the AP test, you will be docked points if you forget your semicolon. So let's go ahead and right-click on hello world, go to run as, and run Java application, and there's the output, hello world. So we got this to run properly. Awesome. Let's try to change the program up a bit. Let's say I have a variable, for instance, something that I have in the past, but I want to reference it in the future. So something that just won't go away right after I use a print statement on it, right? How would I be able to store this value in some place so I can use it for later use? So this is where programming introduces the concept of the variable. So let's go over how the variable works now. So when we have any variable, we start by declaring the variable type. So var type is just the type of the variable. There's several types of variables that we have. And then we have the name of the variable, name, equals, and then the value of the variable, so val. And then don't forget the semicolons, those are important. So this in Java is called an assignment statement. So you're assigning a certain value to a variable. So let's go ahead and try this out. So the first type of variable that we'll work with is called the integer. So int. And we can name the variable whatever we want. So let's name it first variable equals. And we can give it whatever value that we want. And this value will be stored in first variable. So let's try giving it the value QWERT. And as I said earlier, anything in a quotation mark is known as a string. This doesn't work because the value that you have has to match with the type of the variable that you have. Obviously, if you're referencing something and the reference that you're holding is you tell the program that it's an integer, but it's actually a string, it's not going to work. So it's just going to tell you that you can't convert a string to an integer. So let's change this value to be a number. Any integer works, honestly. So 5. Alright, so now let's try printing out first variable. So when we want to reference this variable later on in the program, we use the name that we used in the assignment statement. So in this case, the name of the variable would be first variable. So let's system.out.println this, system.out.println, and in parentheses we type in first variable. Alright, if we run this, there we go. The program prints out 5, exactly as we wanted. Cool. So we can change this int to be a string, and as you can see, the value and the type no longer match. Because the value and the type no longer match, the program gives us an error. It says that we cannot convert from integer to string. So the value has to match with the type that you declare in your assignment statement. This is crucial and is honestly one of the biggest mistakes that's made. So you guys have to make sure to keep that in mind. So if we want to make this a string, we would put it inside quotation marks, and we would type in whatever we wanted our string to be. Like, for the purposes of this, let's just name it awesome. So now if we printed out first variable, note that the variable is now containing a string, and so when we run the program, it's going to print out awesome. Alright, so we're good with that. Let's try to move on and make a little bit more complex applications. So how could we use variables? One use for variables could be, for instance, in a calculator, right? You would want to store the values, and then you would want to, like, for instance, add the values so that we can print them out later, right? So let's make two integers, int a equals 5, for instance, and int b equals 6. Alright, so how can we assign a variable, or assign a value to a variable, and then print out that variable? So how we would do it in Java would be, well, first, let's just try printing out each of these integers on their own. So we see that when we run this, we get 5, right? And let's run another one. So let's system.out.println b, and this should print the value of b. So that's exactly what we get. We get 6. So now if we, let's say, for instance, make a string equals Kevin. And this can get pretty tricky. So the name of our string is John, right? But the value is Kevin. So system.out.println John, this would give us the value of John. This wouldn't print out John. So when we run this program, we would expect it to actually print out Kevin and not John. So let's run the program. As we see, it says Kevin and not John. But if we add quotations, this tells Java that John is its own string and it's not just the name of a variable. So when we run this program, it would print out John. And that's exactly what we get. So cool. I'm glad that's clear now. So let's get rid of this and let's go back to our calculator app. So we want to make an integer and store the sum of a and b. So how would you do this in Java? So let's declare an integer c, and then what we would do is we would do a plus b. So this would take the value that's in a and reference it. So 5 would, it's like plugging 5 into a and plugging 6 into b. That's what you're doing. So the value of c would then store the value of a plus the value of b. So if we system.out.println c, we would expect it to print out 11. So let's try this. Let's go ahead and run the program. And as we can see, it prints out 11. So everything's working just as we expected it to. Awesome. So we can't just run forever on integers, right? There have to be other types of variables in Java for us to be able to do things. Let's make a program where we have decimals instead. So how we use decimals in Java is a variable type called a double. So let's make a double A called 3.14 and a double B 0.56. And to store the sum, we would just do double C equals A plus B. So if we system.out.println and then we pass in C, we would expect this to print out the sum of A and B, 3.7. And that's exactly what we get. Alright, everything's good. So note that we have to use doubles and not integers because integers only store whole number values. Let's move on to an example where we use a string. So for instance, string A equals ILIK, or ILIK. String B equals E computer science. When we put these two strings together, we would expect to get I like computer science. So how do we add these in Java? Well, we could just system.out.println A plus B. Java is really cool and it lets us concatenate is the term. These strings. Concatenating strings is the equivalent of adding integers. We're just mashing the two strings together and getting the value, just sticking them together. Alright guys, so just as a brief overview of what we did today, we went over print statements, we went over how to print a statement. Remember that your S's have to be capital in your print statements and you need semicolons at the end of your program. We went over basic assignment statements and we went over how to assign variables, and then we made a little bit of work with our sample calculator app and then this stuff. Alright, so yeah, this is called an assignment statement, don't forget that. So assignment statement. And that pretty much wraps it up. Thanks for watching the first lecture. I hope you guys learned something. If you guys have any questions, feel free to message me or email me. Alright, see you guys in class.